Today we are going to be breaking down the that's seven players you need to be trading off your fantasy team before it's too late. And I'll even show you some examples of who you should trade them for so you can improve your fantasy team, because that's the whole goal here. Improve your teams and win a championship. And let's start off with one of the most overhyped players the entire summer in Jameson Williams. And as of right now, he's not doing too good in fantasy, but he is coming off of his first game where he was actually relevant to be in your fantasy lineups in a very long time. Because the Detroit Lions wide receiver this past week ended up having 6 catches, 66 yards. He had a touchdown in this game. It was one of his best fantasy performances of the entire season with 16 fantasy points in a 30-17 point loss against the Kansas City Chiefs. And that's very important to call out because we're not going to see the Lions trailing by multiple scores often this year and being forced to throw downfield to where Jameson is more involved and active and seeing more volume. Heck, even in a game where they had to throw the ball nonstop, he still only saw 7 targets, right? You're in a situation where heading into this game, Amon-Ra St. Brown was dealing with a wrist injury. Now, he was off the final injury report, but he missed practice on Wednesday. He was limited on Thursday, so maybe that factored into the play calling or at least how Amon-Ra performed. And really, even with Jameson having this nice day, according to Yahoo Fantasy, 63% of Jameson Williams fantasy managers benched him this past game because you can't trust the guy. How are you possibly going to be starting a guy who was getting you 6 fantasy points, then 18? That was a good game on a 50-yard touchdown that propelled him in that one. But then 6 points, 5 points, 2 points. In 4 out of his 5 games leading into week 6, the guy couldn't even crack 7 fantasy points for you in a PPR format. Half PPR, you weren't even getting 5 fantasy points. So yeah, he should have been on your bench in most leagues. Yes, the speed is flashy. Yes, he was great in college. Yes, it's nice when you see these big broken plays because of how good he is after the catch. But the problem is he's just not all that involved in this version of the Lions offense. The dude only has a 16.8% target share. Obviously, Amon-Ra St. Brown is still the priority here. Obviously, both running backs, especially Jahmyr Gibbs, are very much factored into the offense. And right now, with the new offensive coordinator this year, Sam Laporta is way more involved. We're seeing the Sam Laporta of the second half of last year, of his great rookie season. He's being more involved as a second option in this passing attack, leaving not left on the bone for Jameson Williams, who's only averaging 4.2 targets per game. Even after having 7 targets this past week, that increased his average to just 4 targets per game, only a 17% target share. And look at this, he's only earned 4% of his team's red zone targets. Now that 4% breaks down to exactly 1 red zone target on the entire season. We are 6 weeks into the season, and Jameson Williams has 1 red zone target on 4 targets per game, and that includes a game where he just scored 16 fantasy points. So this might be one of your last chances. I'm sure he's going to have another 20 to 30 plus yard touchdown. I'm sure he's going to have 1 or 2 more of these 15-point fantasy days, but if they're going to be sprinkled in by a bunch of 4 to 5 to 6 point games, how can you ever trust him to start him? He's going to be going off on your bench. You might as well trade him while you still can. I mean, I just can't get over this 1 red zone target through 6 weeks of the season. Like, what is he going to finish the year with? 4 red zone targets? There's just absolutely no upside in this role right now. He has zero design targets on the year. 0 of his targets have been designed on screens, on some sort of crossing route, on an end around, just something to get the ball in his hands. You're seeing 0 of those in the passing attack. This is a terrible role. So while he's coming off of a good game, a game in which the Lions trailed by multiple scores, which won't be often this year, they're one of the best teams in football, why not trade him for Devonta Smith, for Travis Etienne, for his teammate Sam Laporta? I'm making all of these deals instantly if I can right now. Heck, I'm even trading him for a guy who's probably a top 10 running back this upcoming week, and Ja'Cory Merritt, for DeAndre Swift, who looked awesome out of the Bears bye week. Trade him for all these guys right now because Jameson Williams still has the name value. He's coming off of 1 nice game, but for the most part, this is a terrible role. Now, this next guy has the complete opposite of Jameson Williams. He's seeing more usage because of an injury in his backfield for Rico Dowdle of the Carolina Panthers, and he's making the most of it. He's pushing for more playing time even when Hubbard comes back. 23 carries for 206 yards, was a monster, found the end zone in week 5. Week 6, against his former team, the Cowboys, he told them to buckle up. They didn't buckle up, as he said after the game. 30 carries, despite the heavy workload, averages a very efficient over 6 yards per carry. Oh, let's not also forget that he led his team in receiving with 4 catches for 56 yards. The dude is averaging 230 yards, multiple touchdowns over the last 2 games since filling in for Chuba Hubbard. He's like the only reason why the Carolina Panthers probably won the last 2 weeks. Or I should say one of the only reasons, of course. But as you can see right here, Rico Dowdle over the past 2 games, 473 all-purpose yards and 66 fantasy points in just 2 games. Chuba Hubbard for the first month of of the season had just 311 yards and 56 fantasy points. Obviously, Rico Dowdle has looked amazing. He's looked way better than Chuba Hubbard has at probably any point in his career, because Rico Dowdle literally just had the best two-game stretch in Panthers history, and that includes when Christian McCaffrey was there in terms of total yardage. But the problem is Chuba Hubbard is going to return. Who knows if it's this week, if it's next week, but he is going to return, and believe it or not, he's a captain. He was named a captain on this team. Chuba Hubbard, not only was he named the captain, they signed him to a pretty hefty extension towards the end of last year. So they're not going to just put that guy that they gave $12 to $14 to $16 million a year on their bench and not use him. The truth of the matter is Chuba Hubbard was a guy last year when this Panthers offense stunk that basically was the only bright spot on the offense. 1,200 rushing yards, almost 200 receiving yards. He was the entire engine of this offense. They loved him. They paid him. They wanted to bring him back. And the fact that Rico Dowdle just had a great two-game stretch will likely give Rico Dowdle more work, especially compared to what he was seeing the first month of the season when he was a backup. I mean, during that stretch, the first month of the season, you were getting these types of games out of Rico Dowdle. 3 carries, 6 carries, 10 carries, 9 carries. His usage was increasing, especially in the red zone. He was seeing all the red zone usage. And now, obviously, 23 and 30 carries without Hubbard. So I think you're going to see somewhere in the middle. You're not going to just see 3 or 6 after this. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. You'll probably see somewhere between 10 and 12, which is a traditional split backfield. You look at the Seattle Seahawks, Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker, they're splitting like 10 to 12 carries each per week. It's hurting both of their fantasy upsides, and I do think that's probably most likely what's going to happen with this Rico Dowdle situation. It might not seem like that, and you might want to call me crazy in the comment section because Dowdle's been so good, but you have to just keep in mind that this is an organization that named this guy a captain and gave him so much money. I wouldn't be shocked if Dowdle becomes the lead back and sees 60% of the snaps and 12 to 15 touches a week, and Hubbard seeing 8 to 10. It would be a little surprising. I wouldn't be shocked, but that's still nowhere near the role that Dowdle currently has of 27 carries per week the past 2 weeks. That's not going to sustain just naturally, especially when another veteran comes back into the backfield. So while you still can, I'm trading him for Chris Olave, a borderline top 15 week in and week out wide receiver when the bye weeks are going on. I would probably try and trade him right now and grab Zay Flowers plus somebody else. Like, Rico Dowdle's been amazing the last 2 weeks. Cash in on that value because you're probably not getting more than one more week out of that. Oh, heck yeah. Go get Derrick Henry. This trade just happened today as of this recording. Get Derrick Henry as he enters his bye week, and Lamar Jackson should come back after that bye week. Try and get Breece Hall. Amon-Ra St. Brown. People are overpaying right now for Rico Dowdle, who, I get it, he's coming off of 2 massive games. That recency bias is making people think that in weeks 10, 11, 12 into the fantasy postseason, Dowdle's going to be a key asset. Maybe he will, but odds are Chuba Hubbard's going to cut into that. Now, before we get into the next player in this video, 2 seconds of your time to hit the subscribe button. If you enjoy my content, that's all I ask in return as we push towards my goal of 200,000 subscribers. Now, let's talk about Ladd McConkey, who finally had a solid game this past week with his teammate Quentin Johnston out with a hamstring injury in week 6. We'll see if he misses week 7. Hamstrings for receivers, usually you miss a couple of games, although he was practicing in limited fashion. This led to Ladd McConkey having 7 catches for 100 yards and a touchdown. He had a lot of that yardage, almost half of it on a 42-yard catch and run late in the game, but still, he still had his best game of the year, reaches 100 yards for the first time this year, and finds the end zone. Now, this is big because if you look at the first 5 weeks of the season, it was really shaky for Ladd McConkey. A nice game against the Chiefs in week 1, 6 catches, 74 yards. Nobody thought anything was wrong. But after that, 5 catches for 48, 4 catches for 41, just 1 catch for 11 yards, 5 catches, 39 yards. Like, the role was not all that strong. You saw Keenan Allen getting involved for 40 or 50 yards and a touchdown every week for the first month of the season. Quentin Johnston was the clear number 1 option on this team. When Amarion Hampton was healthy, they were leaning on him for a ton of carries every single week, which led to Ladd McConkey only seeing 19% of the team's targets the first 5 games and 43 receiving yards per game. That was atrocious, but as you can see from Ryan Heath right here, in week 6 without Quentin Johnston, McConkey goes for a strong 24% target share, 100 receiving yards, 23 fantasy points. Now, I strongly believe that when Quentin Johnston is back, and a hamstring will limit wide receivers, maybe he misses another game or 2 or is at least limited during that stretch, but once Quentin Johnston is back for the stretch second half of the season, fantasy playoffs, I think Ladd McConkey's upside is going to be capped. Because Quentin Johnston, when he's healthy this year, he's literally been one of the best wide receivers in football, which sounds crazy to say. Let's just look at it. Right here, what is he averaging week in and week out? I'll give you a better view right here. There we go. Week in and week out, 7 targets leads the team, 7 targets, 10 targets, 13 targets leads the team, right? 4 catches for 40 yards when he injures his hamstring in that game. But every single week he's going out there, 25 fantasy points, 16, 15, 24. He was the clear number 1 option on this team. He was leading the team by far in yardage, yards per catch, right up there with Keenan Allen in terms of target share as well, ahead of Ladd McConkey, who was 3rd on the team. Now, I love Ladd McConkey, but even after this past week, even after this past game, when Quentin Johnston didn't even play, Ladd McConkey is still 3rd on the team, even though he's played an extra game game in total yardage, and he's still second on the team in targets behind Keenan Allen, only 2 ahead of Quentin Johnston, who's played 1 less game. In terms of targets per game, he's still 3rd on this team in targets per game, 3rd on this team in yards per game right now. It's a kind of gross situation for Ladd McConkey that you might be able to get out from. You spent most likely a second, if you got lucky, early 3rd round pick on Ladd McConkey. Now that he just had a 100 yards, 7 catch touchdown game and it looks really good, try and trade him for somebody who might actually get you 2nd or 3rd round value, because if we redrafted today, McConkey's like a 5th round pick, maybe a 4th round pick, but I still view him as 3rd in the pecking order in this wide receiver room. I would say probably, actually, I would say 2nd in the pecking order rest of the season, ahead of Keenan Allen, who I think only slows down as the year goes on an older receiver. But look at some of these trades. Courtland Sutton, off of his bad game, he's had literally 3 bad games over his last 18. Courtland Sutton, dating back to last year, make that trade easily right now. Trade Ladd McConkey for Breece Hall if you can. There's some nice trades out here. I'd trade him for Tedero McMillan. I'd trade him probably for Travis Etienne at this point. Breece Hall's an awesome deal that you could do coming off of a bad game. That's probably one that you can get done in a lot of leagues, and I think it helps you. Now, if you want to see my #1 trade target at every single position completely free, I'll send it to you right now with the link in the description below, or by going to topfantasytrades.com. That is topfantasytrades.com. That will take you to this page. You enter your email, and I'll send you those #1 trade targets at every single position. Be sure to check your spam and promotional folders as well. Now, if you want to see my top 150 rest of season rankings, I always get these questions like, Sal, who should I be trading for? I have this guy, but I don't know who should I be trading him for. That's exactly why I built the top 150 rest of season rankings. It ranks the rest of the players if we were to redraft today in order, so you know, hey, I have this guy on my team. Anybody above him would be getting a better player in return. That's all in the Fantasy Blueprint. It's just one of the tools that are in there. It's what I use in all my leagues, the Fantasy Blueprint. Over 10,000 people are currently using in their leagues to win their leagues and schmack around their friends. You can learn more about the Fantasy Blueprint with the link in the description below. It'll take you to this page. It just explains what you get in the Fantasy Blueprint, a little bit about it, and it shows you a bunch of testimonials from the 10,000 people that used it last year and are now using it this year. You can use the link in the description below to check that out, or you can just head to jointheblueprint.com. That is jointheblueprint.com. Next up, I want to talk about DK Metcalf, who's having a really solid year, and he just came out of his bye week with one of his best games on the entire season. 4 catches, 95 yards and a touchdown, but more importantly, he finally saw some volume in this game. 9 targets for DK Metcalf is a season high. He finds a touchdown once again for 17.5 points in a difficult matchup against a good Cleveland Browns defense. Now, my problem with DK Metcalf, who's had multiple back-to-back strong games before the bye week overseas, a big catch and run for an 80-yard touchdown, right? He's been solid this year. My problem, though, is this team isn't throwing the ball, and he's relying on extreme efficiency and touchdowns, which typically don't hold up, especially when you look at DK Metcalf's past career. Like right now, the dude has played in 5 games this year. He's averaging less than 4 catches per game. I mean, he's number 2 in yards after the catch because of a catch and run 80-yard touchdown is going to skew that early in the season. But let's just look at this. The dude right now is top 12 in fantasy points per game, despite ranking 42nd in targets. That's not going to keep up. He's averaging 5.5 targets per game, which is solid for, like, I would say a top 20, top 30 wide receiver, not a borderline top 10 fantasy receiver. If you're going to average 5 to 6 targets in a game in an offense where Aaron Rodgers most weeks is only going to throw 27 to 30 times, that's not great. You're not going to sustain top 12 production unless you keep scoring a touchdown a week, and I don't think that's going to be the case. Right now, DK Metcalf has 4 receiving touchdowns across his 5 games played so far this season when you factor in the bye week. I just don't think he's going to score a touchdown every single week, right? That's not been his MO, right? He only had 5 touchdowns all of last year. He's a top 12 wide receiver right now, despite having very little receiving yards, even less receptions and targets. I think this is going to wear off a little bit. Now, you can just look at it and say he has no target competition. Calvin Austin's been dealing with some injuries. Roman Wilson's not involved at all. Scotty Miller doesn't even really play for this team. Like, it's basically DK Metcalf, some running backs, and some tight ends in the passing attack for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I get that. But that's exactly why they're not throwing a lot. That's why they're probably not going to sustain much drives moving forward when they face tougher competition. So DK Metcalf, when you're watching this, he's going to be playing on Thursday Night Football in a solid matchup against the Bengals. Maybe he has another big game. His stat line in terms of the Vegas box scores is only projected for an over-under of 4 catches. If he's not scoring a touchdown on those 4 catches, at best he's getting you 4 catches, 60 yards. Like, that's somebody I don't want on my team. I want a more consistent producer. And not to mention, the Steelers are looking to trade for a wide receiver, which makes sense when I just showed you their depth. It's pretty atrocious. Some names that are on the market right now have been guys like Jacoby Myers, Chris Olave. If one of these guys goes on the Steelers, yeah, DK Metcalf is absolutely screwed in terms of being a top 12 receiver rest of season. You might want to trade for him as soon as possible or trade to get rid of him. Quinshon Judkins off a bad game. Do that deal right now if you possibly can. Ashton Jeanty is an obvious guy I'd rather have. If you need quarterback hurts, I'll take Jalen Hurts. Breece Hall is a perfect trade target. You're looking at a top 12 wide receiver on paper in DK Metcalf. Breece Hall coming off of a bad game. That's the perfect trade. If you can get it done, I would be targeting Breece Hall. And I'd also be trying to trade away this next running back for kind of similar reasons as we said for Rico Dowdle. Because Rachaad White has been an an RB1 the past 2 weeks in fantasy football, and Bucky Irving does not look like he's close to returning for another week or two, so Rachaad White should continue to be the starting running back. Now, these last couple of games have been great. 2 games ago, the first game without Bucky Irving, Rachaad White, 41 yards, multiple rushing touchdowns, adds 4 catches for 30 yards as well on the ground, 20 plus fantasy points. Week 6, he backs it up with 65 yards rushing, another touchdown. He backs it up with another 3 receptions as well for another 5 fantasy points in PPR formats. Rachaad White has been great. He's averaging like 19 fantasy points per game the last 2 weeks. He's going to start again most likely in week 7, and he might even start another game after that. As you can see right here, he's operating as a workhorse back. Sean Tucker, the 3rd string running back, has not been all that involved as late round quarterback JJ Zacharyson on Twitter. He basically says Rachaad White has seen roughly 78% of the running back rushes and 13% target share in his 2 games without Bucky Irving. He's been an RB1 in both of those contests. He's been awesome, but Bucky Irving is going to return. Maybe it won't be until like week 10, which gives you a couple more weeks out of Rachaad White, so that gives you even more trade bait. Like if Bucky Irving was returning this week, anybody trading for Rachaad White would be like, well, he's just going to be a backup. You get at least another 1 to 2 starts out of Rachaad White, he has a little bit more trade value when that's the case. So this is probably the perfect time off of 2 very good games before Bucky Irving comes back to trade Rachaad White. Let's not forget what he was doing when Bucky Irving was healthy. Bucky Irving was seeing the best usage of his career, and during that time, Rachaad White only 22% of the snaps, 2 carries, 30% of the snaps, 31% of the snaps, 5 carries, 39% of the snaps, 6 carries. That was in a game where Bucky Irving ended up getting injured. So you're talking about a guy who's going to go back to being a backup running back. Bucky Irving was seeing, like I said, the absolute best usage of his career before he got injured. Do you remember this? Last year, you were hoping Bucky Irving would see 50% of the snaps in a game. This year, he was seeing 77, 71, 70, and then 62% of the snaps in the game against the Eagles, in which he got hurt and had to come off the field for a little while, went back in later on, and ended up being hurt too much to play the last couple of weeks and probably the next few weeks. So moving forward, Rachaad White, this week he's a top 12 running back. If Bucky Irving doesn't play next week with the bye weeks, he's probably a top 12 running back. But after that, he goes back to being a clear backup once Bucky is back on the field. So similar to Rico Dowdle, you can make some of these deals right now. I mean, Devonta Smith, I'd be trading him for. Michael Pittman is probably a fair trade that you don't even need to be doing at this point. Nico Collins is an obvious yes. Travis Etienne is an obvious yes. Breece Hall, an obvious yes. Try and trade Rachaad White if you still can while he has value and he's going to project out this week as a top 12 running back. Trade him while you still can. Now, this next guy is a wide receiver who's been probably the best wide receiver in football, at least production-wise, the last 2 weeks. Now, before we get into him, I don't know if you know this, but I've teamed up with DraftKings Pick 6, the official daily fantasy sports partner of the NFL, and they're offering you a chance to win some real money. All right, here's what I'm talking about. Just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats, whether it's your favorite team, whether it's a guy that you like that week based on his matchup, and that allows you to unlock the upside to potentially win some real money. It's as simple as that. There's no convoluted rules. There's no gimmicks. You just pick more or less on some players, and then you watch those players perform. And now here's the best part, a little bit of a bonus for you. New DraftKings Pick 6 customers get $50 in bonus picks with just a $5 entry on your first pick set. This is your opportunity to put your football knowledge to the test. Just download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code SAL. In partnership with DraftKings Pick 6, the crown is yours. Now, that wide receiver who's producing like the best wide receiver the last 2 weeks is, believe it or not, Kendrick Bourne, because he looks fantastic. Back-to-back games of 142 yards on 10 catches, and then, what do you know, another 142 yards on 5 catches. He's averaging the most yards in football during this time. He's seeing 19 fantasy points and 17 fantasy points during this time, and he basically has been Mac Jones' favorite wide receiver. Now, granted, Ricky Pearsall's been out. Juwan Jennings has either been out or been playing through 5 ribs and basically a decoy. Brandon Ayuk's been out. George Kittle's been out. So basically, Kendrick Bourne has been we just have to have somebody produce, and he's been producing at elite levels. But there is a world where it seems like Juwan Jennings is going to play through injury. Ricky Pearsall probably misses another week and then returns. It seems like after the bye week as well that George Kittle is going to miss. Where is he? There he is. Another week and then return. Who knows what happens with Brandon Ayuk? We don't even know if he's going to play football this year, but he could return at some point. So Kendrick Bourne, although it's been very nice these last 2 weeks, very similar to Rico Dowdle, the production's just not going to continue, especially with Kendrick Bourne. For the most part in his career, he's been this journeyman wide receiver. He's been on the 49ers in the past, the Patriots, mostly a slot wide receiver, red zone type guy. He's never been this guy who constantly dominates downfield and is a wide receiver 1. My money is on the fact that he'll probably return to being this wide receiver, the guy who usually averages 300 to 400 yards a year, whose career high was 800 yards when he had to be leaned on heavily and played in every single game. But outside of that, these last few seasons, 400, 300, I mean, he's already on pace in just basically only 2 complete starts. Right now, he's on pace to have his highest receiving total in 5 years. I think that's because Kyle Shanahan's offense is awesome. I think that's because Mac Jones, when he gets to start at quarterback, just fixates on one guy. It happens to be Kendrick Bourne. And I think it's because no other guys on this offense are healthy. But once some of these guys start to get healthy, Kittle's coming back soon, Pearsall should be back soon. Once these guys get healthy, Juwan Jennings' ribs heal a little bit. And really the big one is Brock Purdy. When these guys get healthy, Kendrick Bourne goes back to being maybe a waiver option in 3 or 4 weeks. That's the other thing here. He's been producing with Mac Jones. When Brock Purdy comes back, Brock Purdy loves throwing to Jawan Jennings. He loves throwing to George Kittle. Those guys are all going to be back in probably 1 to 2 weeks or so. I would say closer to 2 weeks. That's when Kendrick Bourne's value is completely gone. So while Bourne still has some value for you, why not try and flip him for T. Higgins like you can see right here? I'd flip him for Travis Hunter, who's trending up right now. I'd flip him for George Kittle, who's coming back from injury soon. I'd flip him if you need a tight end for Darren Waller. We talked about Darren Waller in the Trade for Players video. Be sure to check out that one after this if you haven't watched it. Darren Waller is my #1 trade target at the tight end position, who's actually probably affordable to get. All right, let's go from one wide receiver to another veteran wide receiver, and this time we're going to go to the Cleveland Browns. Because we got to talk about Jerry Jeudy. This is not necessarily a sell high type player, but he just did just see some of the best usage he's seen all season. Now, it was only 5 catches for 43 yards, but he earned 13 targets in this game. And as you can see from JJ Zachariason, Jeudy hit 20% target share for just the second time this season in week 6 at 26%. He hasn't scored, though, 10 or more fantasy points in a game since week 1. So what's your problem here? Well, they threw 52 times last week, Dylan Gabriel and the Browns. Yes, 50 plus times. So the fact that 13 targets is out there for Jerry Jeudy is kind of inflated. In a normal game where they throw 35 times, that's probably like an 8 target game for Jeudy, which is still solid, but nowhere near 13. In fact, the Cleveland Browns lead the NFL this year in pass attempts per game. Now, those pass attempts have not been all that efficient, right? They're averaging 57% completions on their passing attempts this year. Their quarterbacks only 191 passing yards per game. It's been pretty gross overall on offense. So despite the high volume, it's not getting any better. Dylan Gabriel doesn't look good. Maybe Shedeur Sanders probably at this point makes some starts this year. Is that going to look any better? Probably nothing extreme, right? Not going to turn into a top 10 offense. So believe it or not, Jerry Jeudy actually ranks top 10 in the NFL in targets this year after that big target game. He's averaging 7 targets per game. He has a respectable 21% target share. He has no target competition with Cedric Tillman hurt. Now David Njoku hurt. Like, it should be wheels up for Jerry Jeudy, but this offense just stinks so much. Off of a good target game, try and get anything you can for Jerry Jeudy. So you might have to sell low, but honestly, some of the trades out there, Matthew Golden for Jerry Jeudy, give me Golden. Isaiah Pacheco for Jerry Jeudy. Pacheco's at least his usage is trending up. He is somewhat in the right direction compared to Jeudy in a better offense. I'll take Jacoby Myers off of 3 straight down games as well. So if you could trade Jerry Jeudy, it's not necessarily selling high because he's coming off of a 9.5 fantasy point day, but he did have a lot of targets. David Njoku did just get hurt. Maybe some people think that Jeudy is a nice cheap option to buy. Try and flip him while you can. And definitely try and flip Hollywood Brown for literally anything you can possibly get. After this past week, he had another 4 catches, multiple touchdowns, and 18 fantasy points. He just had 19 fantasy points in week 1, a 13-point game, and 20 fantasy points. I mean, the dude has scored at least 8.5 fantasy points every single week, which is pretty solid. 8.5 fantasy points during some of the bye weeks and at least gets you by. But obviously, there's a clear and obvious reason why Marquise Brown is no longer going to be anywhere near valuable in fantasy. And that reason is not only is Xavier Worthy seem healthy now, but Rashee Rice returns this week. These are going to be by far the top 2 target earners on the team. You still have Travis Kelce there. You still have Patrick Mahomes running the ball a lot. There's just not going to be a lot of opportunities left for Marquise Hollywood Brown. Now, a lot of people in your fantasy league probably know Rashee Rice is coming back. They probably know Marquise Hollywood Brown is not going to be valuable, but it's at least worth floating it out there. It doesn't have to be a 1-for-1 deal. He could just be thrown in as an add-on after he just had like a 20 fantasy point day. This is going to be the best value the rest of the season. Before Rashee returns off of a 2-touchdown game, Marquise Brown might not get you a lot as people expect Rashee to come back, but he might get you something. He might be at least used as a sweetener in some deals, but look at some of the trades that have happened the last 24 hours. Hollywood Brown for Jalen Waddle, Hollywood Browns for Stephon Diggs off of a down game, for Kenneth Walker, for Isaiah Pacheco. I'll take all these guys in return for Hollywood Brown. Even Jackson Dart, if you need quarterback help at this point, for Hollywood Brown, I would take. So these are the guys you should trade away in your fantasy league while you can still get some value for them. And if you want to see the players you should trade them for, well, you can check out this video right here. These are the 10 players who I believe could be potential league winners for you, and you should trade for them before your friends do.